She was born among cracked sidewalks and broken promises, where every step was an act of resistance. Upon accepting a new job in a silent mansion, she encounters a frail, elderly woman and a cruel daughter-in-law hiding dark secrets. Amid denied medicine and forbidden affection, she decides to save the one everyone seemed to want to forget. That simple choice, made with her heart, ignites a revolution that will transform her life and the lives of hundreds of other invisible souls. Marianne dried her hands on her faded apron and looked out the bus window as the vehicle swayed through the bumpy streets of London. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but she was already on her way to her first job of the day. At 28, she carried a responsibility on her shoulders that had begun when she was just 12. Back then, her father had left without warning, leaving her mother, Grace, alone with 4 children to raise. Marianne, the eldest, had no choice but to grow up too fast. Grace had always been a woman of grit, a skilled seamstress who worked late into the night to put food on the table. But even with all her dedication, money was always tight. That's when Marianne started accompanying her neighbor, Mrs. Lucille, on cleaning jobs, carrying buckets, and learning that dignity had nothing to do with the type of work one did. Mrs. Lucille always repeated the same lesson Grace preached at home. It doesn't matter if you're scrubbing floors or signing contracts. What matters is doing it with honor and heart. Now, so many years later, Marianne worked for a cleaning agency that sent her to homes in affluent neighborhoods across the city. She knew the routine well. Arrive early, work in silence, ask no questions. The employers rarely looked her in the eye, rarely asked her full name. She was just another one of the many Marys who passed through those enormous houses, cleaning up what others dirtied, organizing what others messed up. Her cell phone vibrated in her pocket. It was Mr. Arthur, the agency manager. Marianne answered with a bad feeling. Mr. Arthur rarely called so early unless there was some urgent problem. "Girl, I need you now, emergency." Mrs. Helen, who looked after Mrs. Amelia at the Albrights' house, had a health issue and couldn't come. "The madam is desperate, said she needs someone trustworthy today. You're my best employee, can you go?" Marianne thought quickly. She had 3 houses scheduled that day, but Mr. Arthur's voice sounded tense. He would never ask for something like this if it wasn't truly important. Besides, the Albrights were a well-known family in the city, owners of a gigantic construction company. Working for them could mean a valuable recommendation. "Yes, I can, Mr. Arthur. What's the address?" He quickly gave her the information. Kensington, one of London's most expensive areas. Marianne had never worked in that area before. She felt a chill in her stomach, but took a deep breath. It was just another job, another house, another family that needed her services. 2 hours later, she stood before an imposing wrought-iron gate. The mansion behind it looked like something out of a decorating magazine. Perfectly manicured gardens, a fountain in the center of the circular drive, gleaming white walls under the morning sun. Marianne pressed the intercom and waited. A feminine voice, cold and distant, answered. "Who is it?" "I'm Marianne Silver from the cleaning agency. I've come to replace Mrs. Helen." There was a pause. Then the gate opened with an electric hum. Marianne walked along the cobblestone path to the main door, where she was greeted by an impeccably dressed woman. Blonde hair pulled back in an elegant bun, expensive clothes, perfect makeup. Her blue eyes scanned Marianne from head to toe with an expression that mixed distrust and impatience. "You're the replacement?" the woman asked without greeting her. "Yes, ma'am," Marianne replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'm Patricia Albright. This is my house, and I have very clear rules. Absolute punctuality, no unnecessary conversations, and above all, total secrecy about everything you see or hear here. Is that clear?" Marianne nodded. "Perfectly clear, ma'am." Patricia guided her through the house, pointing out rooms with quick gestures. The living room was immense, decorated with Italian designer furniture. The kitchen looked like it had come out of an architectural show, with appliances Marianne didn't even know existed. Everything smelled of chemical cleaners and expensive flowers. "Your main role will be to care for my mother-in-law, Mrs. Amelia. She's in the back room. She's 92 and very frail. The doctor recommended complete bed rest, so you must strictly follow the routine I'm about to give you." Patricia handed Marianne a sheet of paper with detailed instructions. "Breakfast at 8, lunch at noon, dinner at 6. The portions are all marked. No giving her extra food. She has serious restrictions. Mary Ann took the sheet and frowned as she read. The portions were extremely small. Breakfast, half a cup of tea and 2 water crackers. Lunch, 3 tablespoons of thin soup. Dinner, repeat of lunch. Excuse me, Mrs. Patricia, but these portions don't seem sufficient for an elderly person to stay well nourished, Mary Ann commented carefully. Patricia's eyes flashed with irritation. Are you a doctor? No? Then follow the instructions and don't question them. Dr. Mansfield, who is London's top geriatrician, prescribed this diet especially for her. If you don't feel capable of following simple orders, I can call the agency and ask for someone else. Mary Ann felt her blood boil, but swallowed her anger. No, ma'am, I will follow the instructions. Good. The room is this way. They walked down a long corridor until they reached a door at the end. Patricia knocked once and entered without waiting for a reply. The atmosphere was completely different from the rest of the house. Dark, with heavy curtains drawn, the air was stuffy, with a strange smell of mold and abandonment. In the center of the room, an old bed where a frail figure lay. Amelia, your new caregiver has arrived, Patricia announced loudly, almost aggressively. I hope you cooperate with her, just as you should have cooperated with Mrs. Helen. The elderly woman didn't respond. Her eyes were closed, her face pale and marked by deep wrinkles. Her hands trembled, slightly on the white sheet. She often gets like this, a bit distant. Don't worry, it's normal at her age. Patricia turned to leave. Oh, and her phone is with me. The doctor said she shouldn't have strong emotions, so it's best to avoid calls. If her son, my husband Robert, calls, I'll answer myself and pass on the information. He travels a lot for work and can't be worrying. What if she needs to speak with him? Mary Ann asked. She doesn't need to. I take care of everything. Patricia closed the door behind her, leaving Mary Ann alone with Mrs. Amelia. The silence was heavy. Mary Ann approached the bed and observed the elderly woman more closely. Her face had delicate features, and even in her frail state, it was possible to see that she had been a beautiful woman. But there was something more, something in her closed eyes, in her shallow breathing, in the way her hands weakly clutched the sheet. Mrs. Amelia? Mary Ann called softly. Can you hear me, ma'am? The elderly woman's eyes opened slowly. They were brown, deep, and carried a sadness that Mary Ann recognized immediately. It was the same sadness she had seen in her own grandmother's eyes when she had fallen ill years ago. Who are you? The voice was weak, but there was lucidity in it. My name is Mary Ann. I've come to care for you for a few days. Where is Helen? She had an unforeseen problem, but you can rest assured I will take good care of you. Amelia studied her for a long moment. Then, to Mary Ann's surprise, her eyes filled with tears. Please, she whispered, please help me. Mary Ann felt her heart clench. Help how, Mrs. Amelia? They're killing me slowly, the elderly woman said, and her voice trembled. My son doesn't know. He thinks I'm fine, but I'm not. She locked me in here, took my phone, won't let me talk to anyone. I'm so thirsty, so hungry. Please, you seem like a good girl, please. The words cut Mary Ann like blades. She looked around the room now with different eyes. The curtains closed to keep the elderly woman in darkness. The food rationed to weaken her. The isolation so that no one would know what was happening. She felt anger rise in her throat but forced herself to remain calm. I will help you, ma'am, Mary Ann promised, holding Amelia's trembling hand. But I need you to trust me and tell me everything. Over the next few hours, while mechanically performing the tasks Patricia had ordered, Mary Ann listened to Mrs. Amelia's story in whispered pieces, like someone assembling a macabre puzzle. The elderly woman said that her son, Robert, was a good man, dedicated to the family business, but completely blind to what was happening inside his own home. He traveled constantly, closing contracts, supervising construction, and trusted Patricia entirely to care for his mother. Initially, Amelia explained, everything seemed normal. Patricia was attentive, brought teas, talked about pleasantries, but when doctors diagnosed that Amelia would need permanent care, something changed. Her daughter-in-law began to act differently when Robert wasn't around. Small cruelties disguised as medical zeal, The food gradually decreased. Water became controlled. Medicines were given in half doses or sometimes purposefully forgotten. "She thinks I don't notice, but I notice everything," Amelia said, her eyes welling up. "I hear her talking on the phone, talking about inheritance, about assets, about how much longer I'll last. My husband left everything in my name when he passed, away years ago. They are valuable properties, stocks, investments. If I pass away, everything goes to Robert and consequently to her." Mary Ann felt a shiver run down her spine. She listened attentively as she prepared a thin soup, following Patricia's ridiculously restrictive instructions. But in her mind, she was already planning how she could help that lady without jeopardizing her own job. She needed to be careful, strategic. "Mrs. Amelia, do you have any way to prove what you're saying? Documents, recordings, anything?" The elderly woman shook her head, weak. "She took my cell phone months ago. She said it was so I wouldn't get tired answering messages, that she would do it for me. Robert sends messages asking how I am, and she replies that everything is fine, that I'm just tired and need rest. My son is so busy that he believes it without questioning. He loves me, I'm sure of it, but he's being deceived." Mary Ann served the thin soup in a small bowl, but secretly prepared another, larger portion that she hid in a thermal container she had brought from home. When Patricia left for an engagement in the middle of the afternoon, as per her daily routine, Mary Ann locked the room door and offered the additional food to Amelia. "We can't let her know," Mary Ann warned, "but you need to eat properly. I'll do this every day, little by little." Amelia ate with an urgency that broke Mary Ann's heart. It was like watching someone who had been on the verge of starvation finally receive relief. As the elderly woman ate, Mary Ann opened the curtains just a little, letting natural light in for the first time in who knows how long. The room needed air, life. "I need to find your phone," Mary Ann said, determined. "Where does Patricia usually keep her things?" "In her office on the second floor," Amelia replied between spoonfuls. "But it's dangerous. She's always locking that room. I'll figure something out." In the following days, Mary Ann established a dual routine. In front of Patricia, she was the obedient and silent employee. She followed instructions to the letter, asked no questions, kept her head down. But when her employer left, she transformed into Mrs. Amelia's secret guardian. She brought fruits hidden in her bag, homemade biscuits that her mother, Grace, made, extra bottles of water that she kept in a cabinet in the room. Each day she saw the elderly woman regaining a little color in her face, a little more strength in her voice. "You're an angel," Amelia always said, with tears in her eyes. "For months, no one has treated me with humanity." Helen tried to help too, but she was so afraid of losing her job that she couldn't do much. One afternoon, while Patricia was at a charity meeting, as she ironically called her social gatherings, Mary Ann decided to act. She climbed the stairs silently to the second floor and found the office. The door was, as Amelia had warned, locked, but Mary Ann hadn't grown up in the London suburbs without learning a few tricks. With a hairpin and patience, she managed to open the simple lock. The office was luxurious and organized, a noble wooden desk, shelves full of books that seemed never to have been opened, just decorative. Mary Ann quickly searched the drawers, her heart pounding in her chest. She found financial documents, bank statements, but nothing that seemed incriminating at first glance. Then, in a locked drawer that she had to force open, she found Mrs. Amelia's phone. The battery was dead. Mary Ann took the device and hid it inside her blouse, then locked everything again and went downstairs as quickly as possible. Back in Amelia's room, she connected the phone to a charger she had brought hidden in her bag and waited anxiously. When the phone finally turned on, the screen exploded with notifications. Dozens, hundreds of unread messages. Most were from Robert. Mary Ann felt her hands tremble as she read. "Mum, I'm worried. Are you okay? Patricia said you're tired, but I wanted to hear your voice. Mum, please call me when you can. I'm coming back from Washington, D.C. next week. I'll visit you." The messages repeated, each one carrying more anguish than the last. The son clearly loved his mother and was desperate to hear from her, but was being systematically blocked by Patricia. Mary Ann showed the messages to Amelia, who began to cry profusely. "My son, my boy, He's suffering and doesn't even know what's happening here, Amelia sobbed. I need to talk to him. I need to tell him the truth. Not yet, Mrs. Amelia, Mary Ann said, thinking quickly. If we call now, Patricia will. No, we found the phone and will come up with some excuse. She might even fire me and put someone she completely controls in my place. We need concrete evidence before acting. What kind of evidence? Mary Ann thought for a moment. I need to record a conversation of hers or find documents that prove her intentions, something Robert can't ignore. Over the next week, Mary Ann became an amateur detective. She began observing Patricia's schedule, her phone conversations, her visitors. She noticed that every Thursday around 3 in the afternoon, Patricia received a visit from a man in a dark suit who never entered through the main door, but through the side gate leading to the garden. They locked themselves in the office for about an hour. On one of these Thursdays, Mary Ann pretended to be cleaning the corridor near the office. The walls were thick, but she could hear fragments of the conversation when she put her ear to the door. Are the documents ready? It was Patricia's voice. Yes, but we need to act soon. The longer she lasts, the more suspicious it looks. The man's voice was grave and professional. I'm doing what I can. Less food, less water, less medicine, but the old woman is resilient. What about the son? He suspects nothing. He trusts me completely. When she finally passes, everything will be legally transferred. I have full power of attorney. And my share? 20% of everything as we agreed, but you need to ensure the papers are incontestable. Leave it to me. I've been doing this for years. No one will question it. Mary Ann moved away from the door before they finished, her heart pounding. This was worse than she had imagined. It wasn't just neglect or domestic cruelty. It was a deliberate, calculated plan with the complicity of someone who was probably a corrupt lawyer. Patricia wasn't just mistreating her mother-in-law, she was actively working to hasten her end to get the inheritance. That night, after Patricia had retired to her quarters, Mary Ann sat beside Amelia's bed and held her hand. Mrs. Amelia, I need you to be strong a little longer. I've discovered serious things. Your daughter-in-law isn't acting alone. There's a man, probably a lawyer, helping her prepare fraudulent documents to transfer your assets. Amelia closed her eyes, but squeezed Mary Ann's hand with surprising strength. I knew it. I always knew there was something bigger. What are we going to do? I'm going to call your son, but I need to do it at the right time when he can act immediately. If he comes here unprepared, Patricia can hide everything and make me look crazy. Robert returns from his trip in 3 days, Amelia said. Patricia mentioned it yesterday. He'll be in London for 2 weeks. Then that's when we act, Mary Ann decided. But until then, we need you to continue appearing weak in front of her. We can't let her realize you're getting better. Amelia agreed, and for the first time in months, Mary Ann saw a glimmer of hope in those tired eyes. The elderly woman was no longer alone in the fight for her own life. The next 3 days were a mixture of tension and hope. Mary Ann continued her dual routine with even more care, knowing that any slip could ruin everything. Mrs. Amelia, in turn, showed surprising inner strength. Even physically weak, she remained mentally alert, collaborating with the plan and pretending to be even more debilitated when Patricia appeared in the room. Mary Ann took advantage of every minute she was alone with the elderly woman to feed her properly, talk, and keep her hopes alive. Amelia told stories of when Robert was a child, of how she had raised her son alone after her husband faced health problems that kept him away from business. She spoke of the pride she felt seeing her son transform the small family construction company into an empire, and she also spoke of the pain of seeing that same son being deceived by the woman he chose to marry. I saw from the beginning that she wasn't sincere, Amelia confessed one afternoon. But Robert was so in love, so blinded by love, I thought that with time she would change, that his love would transform her. But it only got worse. When I got sick, it was as if she saw an opportunity. Mr. Robert didn't notice anything strange, Mary Ann asked as she helped Amelia sit up to eat a vegetable soup she had secretly prepared. He travels too much, 3-4 days a week out of London. Patricia has always been very good at manipulating reality. When he's here, she's the perfect wife, attentive, concerned. She brings flowers to my room, talks to me kindly in front of him. It's all a big lie, but Robert believes it because he wants to believe it. On the morning of the third day, Mary Ann arrived at the mansion with her stomach churning with nervousness. Robert would arrive that afternoon, according to what Patricia had mentioned at breakfast. It was the chance they had been waiting for. Mary Ann had decided she would call him when she was alone with Amelia after lunch, when Patricia usually left for her social activities, but fate had other plans. Around 11 in the morning, while Mary Ann was in the room organizing Mrs. Amelia's medication, she heard a muffled cry coming from the bed. She turned quickly and saw the elderly woman with her hand on her chest, her face contorted in pain. "Mrs. Amelia," Mary Ann ran to her. "What are you feeling?" "My chest," the elderly woman gasped. "It's tightening so much, I can't breathe properly." Mary Ann recognized the signs immediately. Her grandmother had suffered a heart attack years ago, and she had never forgotten the symptoms. Without thinking twice, she took the cell phone she kept hidden in her pocket and dialed the emergency medical number. "Hello, I need an ambulance urgently. A 92-year-old woman is having heart attack symptoms." Mary Ann quickly gave the address, her voice firm despite the fear she felt. Patricia appeared at the bedroom door, attracted by the commotion. "What's going on here?" she demanded to know, her eyes narrowing when she saw Mary Ann on the phone. "Mrs. Amelia is unwell," Mary Ann replied, defying her employer's icy gaze. "I called an ambulance. She needs to go to the hospital now." "You had no authorization to do that," Patricia advanced, furious. "I decide what happens in this house." "With all due respect, Mrs. Patricia, but your mother-in-law's life is at risk. I won't stand by and watch her suffer." Mary Ann stood firm, positioning herself protectively beside the bed. The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later, which felt like an eternity. The paramedics quickly assessed Amelia and confirmed the suspected heart attack. They needed to act urgently. Patricia tried to prevent Mary Ann from accompanying the ambulance, but one of the paramedics intervened. "You can come with us if you wish," he said directly to Mary Ann. Sometimes the presence of someone familiar helps keep the patient calm. Mary Ann didn't hesitate. She got into the ambulance with Mrs. Amelia, holding her hand throughout the journey to St. Raphael's Hospital. Patricia stayed behind, visibly irritated but unable to stop the procedure without raising suspicion. At the hospital, while Amelia was taken to the emergency room, Mary Ann faced a dilemma. The doctors needed information about the patient's history, her medications, everything. And Mary Ann had very little. Worse still, when they asked about payment, she realized she couldn't afford those costs. That's when she made a decision that would change everything. She excused herself from the doctors, went out to the corridor and took Mrs. Amelia's cell phone, which she had brought with her in her bag. With trembling hands, she looked for Robert's number in the contacts and called. The phone rang 3 times before a male voice answered. "Hello, Mum, is that you?" "Mr. Robert, my name is Mary Ann Silver. I'm your mother's caregiver. She's at St. Raphael's Hospital. She had a heart attack. You need to come now." There was a shocked silence on the other end. "What do you mean, heart attack? But Patricia told me she was fine, just resting. Where is Patricia?" "Mr. Robert, please, just come. There's a lot you need to know, but now isn't the time. Your mother needs you. Please." "I'm in Glasgow, but I'll catch the first flight. I'll be there in 2 hours." He paused. You've been taking care of her until now?" "Yes, sir." Thank you for being there." He hung up. Mary Ann returned to the waiting room, where the doctors found her minutes later. Fortunately, they had managed to stabilize Amelia. The heart attack was not as severe as they initially feared, but she would need to remain hospitalized under observation for at least 48 hours. "What about the costs?" Mary Ann asked, already knowing she couldn't pay. "We'll need a financial guarantor. Do you have health insurance?" "Her son is coming. He'll sort it out," Mary Ann promised, hoping Robert would arrive soon. The next few hours were a blur of anxiety. Mary Ann didn't leave Mrs. Amelia's side, who slept under the effect of mild sedatives. Patricia called Mary Ann's cell phone several times, which she simply ignored. She knew she would have to face her employer eventually, but for now, her priority was to ensure Amelia was safe. 2.5 hours after the call, a tall man rushed through the ICU door. He was around 40, with slightly graying brown hair and dark eyes full of concern. He wore an expensive but disheveled suit, as if he had dressed in a hurry. "My mother, where is my mother?" he asked the first nurse he saw. Mary Ann stood up. "Mr. Robert?" He turned to her. "Yes. How is she? Can I see her?" "She's stable but needs rest. The doctor said you can see her briefly." Mary Ann guided him to the room where Amelia was resting. Robert entered and stopped beside the bed, looking at his mother with an expression of deep pain. She looked so fragile, so small in that hospital bed. He took her hand gently and whispered, "Mum, I'm here. Everything will be all right now." Amelia slowly opened her eyes, still drowsy from the medication. When she focused on her son's face, her eyes filled with tears. "Robert, my son. I'm here, Mum. I won't leave you alone anymore." Mary Ann watched the scene from a distance, feeling her own heart clench. But she knew that was just the beginning. There was still much Robert needed to know, many harsh truths that needed to be told. "Mr. Robert," she called softly. "When you have a moment, we need to talk. It's very important." He looked at her with a confused expression but agreed. "In a bit. Let me be with her for a while first." Mary Ann nodded and left the room, giving them privacy. She sat in the waiting room and took a deep breath. The moment of truth was coming. Soon she would have to tell Robert everything, reveal the horrors his mother had been suffering, and she had no idea how he would react. Half an hour later, Robert left the room. His mother had fallen back asleep. He approached Mary Ann with a serious expression. "You said we need to talk. What is it about?" Mary Ann looked around, making sure they were alone. "Mr. Robert, what I'm about to tell you may be difficult to hear, but you need to know the truth about what's happening to your mother." And then, with a calm but firm voice, Mary Ann told him everything. The rationed food, the denied water, the incorrectly given medication, the forced isolation, the confiscated phone, his messages that never reached Amelia, and finally, the conversation she had overheard between Patricia and the lawyer, revealing the plan to hasten Amelia's end and claim the inheritance. Robert remained silent for long minutes after Mary Ann finished telling him everything. His face had lost all color, and his hands trembled visibly. He ran his hands through his hair, took several deep breaths, as if trying to process information impossible to believe. "This can't be true," he finally said, his voice weak. "Patricia has been my wife for 8 years. She always took care of my mother, always was attentive." "Why are you telling me these things?" Mary Ann expected this reaction. She remained calm and replied firmly, "Because it's the truth, Mr. Robert. Your mother was slowly dying in that house, and no one but her and Patricia knew. You were traveling, trusting that everything was fine, but it wasn't. Do you have proof? Any evidence of what you're saying?" Robert asked, still resisting the reality. "I have your mother's testimony. When she wakes up completely, you can ask her yourself, and I have this." Mary Ann took Amelia's cell phone and showed him the messages. "All your unread messages, hundreds of them. Your mother never received any because Patricia confiscated her phone." Robert took the device with trembling hands and began to read his own messages. He saw his growing desperation there week after week to speak with his mother and receiving only cold replies from Patricia, saying that Amelia was resting. Reality began to set in. "But this doesn't prove that Patricia was—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Even in the face of the evidence, it was too difficult to accept that the woman with whom he shared his life was capable of such cruelty. "Mr. Robert, I understand this is painful," Mary Ann said gently, "but you need to see the truth. You need to protect your mother, and to do that, you need to act now, before Patricia discovers her plan has been exposed." "What do you suggest I do?" Mary Ann thought quickly. "Go back home, but don't confront Patricia yet. Observe. Pay attention to her behavior, and if possible, try to find the documents she's preparing with the lawyer. If you can get physical evidence, you can take the necessary legal action." Robert agreed, still stunned. "But first I need to resolve the situation here at the hospital. I'll take care of all the costs, everything my mother needs. And you?" He looked at Mary Ann with profound gratitude. "How can I thank you? You saved my mother's life. If you hadn't acted when you did, if you hadn't called me—" "You don't need to thank me, sir. Just do the right thing now. Protect your mother." In the following days, while Amelia recovered in the hospital under intensive care, Robert put a careful plan into action. He returned home and feigned normalcy, but was hyper-vigilant to every move Patricia made. He noticed small things that had previously gone unnoticed: the coldness with which she spoke of her mother-in-law when she thought he wasn't listening, the whispered calls she interrupted when he entered the room, the poorly disguised nervousness after she learned Amelia was hospitalized. On the third day, Robert discreetly hired a private investigator who confirmed the existence of a lawyer named Julian Miller with a history of professional irregularities. The investigator also discovered that Patricia had made several visits to registry offices in recent weeks, always alone, always with voluminous documents, armed. With this information, Robert decided it was time to act. But first he needed to confront Patricia in a way she couldn't deny or hide. He meticulously planned with Mary Ann's help, who continued visiting Amelia at the hospital and kept Robert informed about his mother's health. The following Thursday, the day Patricia usually received a visit from the lawyer Julian Miller, Robert put the plan into action. He pretended he was leaving for an important meeting in Manchester and left the house in the morning. But instead he returned disguised. He wore simple worker's clothes, a cap that hid part of his face, and entered through the back door that led to the service area, an entrance that was rarely locked during the day. He hid in the storage room next to Patricia's office, a small space full of cleaning supplies that had a thin wall shared with the office. From there he could hear everything clearly, and he had brought his cell phone set to record. Punctually at 3 in the afternoon, Julian Miller arrived. Robert heard footsteps in the corridor, the office door opening and closing, and then the voices began. "I finally got the documents signed." It was Patricia's voice, triumphant. "The power of attorney is full and irrevocable. When the old woman passes, I can transfer everything without needing Robert's authorization." "Excellent. But she's still alive and now in the hospital. That complicates things." Julian's voice sounded worried. "It's only a matter of time. She's very old, very fragile, and when she leaves the hospital, I'll make sure she returns to the same treatment as before, perhaps even more restrictive. We can't take risks now that we're so close. And that new caregiver, that Mary Ann, I'll fire her as soon as Amelia comes home. She was too observant, asked too many questions. I need someone who simply obeys orders without questioning." Robert felt bile rise in his throat. To hear those words, to hear the woman he had married planning his mother's deliberate neglect, talking about her imminent passing as if it were a simple problem to be solved. It was too much to bear. But he forced himself to keep recording, to get as much evidence as possible. "As for the properties," Julian continued, "I already have interested buyers for at least 3 of the Albright family properties. As soon as everything is transferred to your name, we can make the sales quickly. You'll get about £40 million net after paying my commission, of course." "40 million," Patricia repeated, greed evident in her voice. "Finally, I'll be able to live the life I always deserved, away from that annoying old woman and this boring marriage. Robert is a good provider, but he's so predictable, so proper. After I have the money, I'll ask for a divorce and start over somewhere else." Robert closed his eyes, feeling as if he were in free fall. It wasn't just about the money or the inheritance. Patricia planned to destroy his family and abandon him, all coldly calculated. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with details about the fraudulent documents, the offshore bank accounts where the money would be deposited, the plans to ensure no one suspected anything. When he finally heard Julian say goodbye and leave, Robert waited a few more minutes before coming out of his hiding place. He returned to the car he had parked 3 blocks away, took off his disguise and took a deep breath. He had everything recorded. He had the necessary evidence. Now he needed to act, but intelligently. He called his personal lawyer, Dr. Albert Sampson, a trusted man who had worked with his family for decades. "Albert, I need you now. It's urgent," Robert said as soon as the lawyer answered. "I have proof that my wife is committing fraud and planning neglect against my mother. I need to know my rights and how to proceed legally." Dr. Albert advised him to go directly to the police station to file a formal report, but first suggested that he keep copies of all recordings in multiple secure places. He also advised Robert to remove Patricia from any joint bank accounts and immediately revoke any power of attorney she might have. Robert spent the next few hours meticulously executing each step. He went to the police station, presented the recordings, and explained the entire situation. The police took the case seriously, especially when he mentioned Julian Miller's name, who was apparently already known for suspicious activities. A detective specializing in fraud took over the case and promised to act quickly. When he finally returned home that night, it was late. Patricia was in the living room watching television as if nothing had happened. Seeing him enter, she smiled, with that expression he once found charming, but now saw as a mask. "Darling, I thought you'd be home later. How was the meeting in Manchester?" she asked, getting up to kiss him. Robert subtly pulled away. "It was productive. I discovered some very interesting things." He kept his voice neutral, controlled. "That's good. Are you hungry? I can order something for dinner." She continued the charade of the dedicated wife. "No need. I've already eaten. By the way, Patricia, I need to tell you some news. My mother is being discharged from the hospital tomorrow. The doctors said she's recovering surprisingly well." He saw a shadow cross Patricia's face, a split second of annoyance before she recomposed her mask. "Oh, how wonderful. That must be a relief for you. I'll prepare her room to receive her." "Actually," Robert said calmly, "I've decided she won't be coming back here. I'm taking her to a specialized clinic for elderly care where she'll have doctors and nurses available 24 hours a day." Patricia's expression changed instantly. The false smile disappeared, replaced by a mask of poorly disguised annoyance. "A clinic? But darling, she can stay here at home. I take care of her, I always have." Robert stared at her firmly. "I think it's better for her to have professional care, and I've already made my decision." In the following days, everything happened quickly. The police, armed with the recordings and evidence Robert had provided, launched a formal investigation. Julian Miller was called in for questioning and, in the face of irrefutable evidence, ended up confessing the entire scheme in exchange for a possible reduction in sentence. He confirmed that Patricia had approached him months ago with a detailed plan to appropriate Amelia's inheritance. The frauds were extensive. Forged documents, fake signatures, illegal powers of attorney. Julian had used his position as a lawyer to lend an appearance of legitimacy to the scheme. The investigation also revealed that it was not the first time he had been involved in similar scams against vulnerable elderly people. When the police arrived at the mansion to arrest Patricia, she tried to maintain her composure, claiming innocence and accusing Robert of being manipulated, but the evidence was indisputable. She was taken into custody while Robert watched, feeling a complex mixture of betrayal, relief, and sadness. With Patricia detained and the case in the hands of the authorities, Robert could finally focus on what truly mattered: his mother. Amelia was discharged from the hospital a week later, visibly stronger and healthier than she had been in months. The doctors were impressed with her recovery and attributed it not only to medical care, but also to the emotional support she had received. Robert took her to a comfortable suite in a high-standard rehabilitation clinic where she would have constant medical supervision while she fully recovered. But he made sure to keep Mary Ann nearby. He formally hired her as his mother's private caregiver with a decent salary, full benefits, and the guarantee that she would be treated with the respect she deserved. Mary Ann, initially hesitant to accept so many privileges, eventually agreed when Amelia personally insisted. "You saved my life, dear," the elderly woman had said, holding her hands with renewed strength. "Not just physically, but you gave me hope when I thought there was none left. You are part of my family now." During the weeks of recovery at the clinic, something beautiful began to blossom. Amelia, finally free from the toxic environment and with proper care, regained not only physical health but also the sparkle in her eyes. She talked at length with Mary Ann about her life experiences, her memories, her regrets, and her hopes. It was during one of these conversations that Amelia revealed a secret she had kept for decades. "You know, Mary Ann, there's something I've never told anyone, not even Robert. When I was very young, before I got married, I had a daughter. It was a different time, and I wasn't able to raise her alone. I was forced by circumstances and my own family to give her up for adoption." The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears. "I always wondered what happened to her, if she was happy, if she had a good life. It's a pain I've carried for over 60 years. Mary Ann squeezed Amelia's hand, moved. "Have you ever tried to find her, Ma'am?" "I didn't have the courage. I was afraid of opening old wounds, of not being accepted. But now, after everything I've been through, after almost losing everything, I think maybe it's time to try. Even if it's too late, I need to at least try." Robert, when he learned of the revelation, was initially shocked, but then embraced his mother, tenderly. "Mum, you have a daughter somewhere, and I have a sister I never knew. We'll find her, no matter how long it takes." They hired an investigator specializing in adoption cases. It took 3 months of intensive searching, sifting through old records, contacting orphanages that still existed, following tenuous leads. But finally they found her. Amelia's daughter was named Lucy. She was 63, a retired teacher, and lived in Edinburgh with her own family. The reunion was carefully organized. First, the investigator contacted Lucy to explain the situation and verify if she was interested in meeting her biological mother. Lucy, who had always known she was adopted and had always wondered about her origins, accepted immediately, moved. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe in central London. Amelia was more nervous than she had ever been, holding Mary Ann's hand for support. When Lucy entered, the two women recognized each other instantly. There was something in their eyes, in the shape of their faces, that was undeniably familiar. "Mother," Lucy said, her voice choked. "My daughter," Amelia replied, and they embraced, crying decades of separation, of unanswered questions, of love that had never died despite the distance. Robert watched the scene beside Mary Ann, also moved. He had gained a sister. Lucy was kind, polite, and held no resentment for the past. She understood that her biological mother had done what she could in a difficult time. Her adoptive family had loved her unconditionally, and now she had the chance to know her roots too. In the following months, the family reconstituted itself in unexpected ways. Lucy visited London regularly, spending time with Amelia and Robert. She brought her own children, who discovered they had cousins and a grandmother they didn't know existed. The house Robert had bought for his mother, a cozy residence in a quiet neighborhood, filled with life and laughter. Mary Ann continued as Amelia's caregiver, but the role had evolved. She was more a companion, a friend, part of the family. Amelia encouraged her to study, to dream beyond the limitations life had always imposed. With Robert's financial support, Mary Ann began a technical nursing course, discovering she had a true talent for caring for people. It was also during this period that the relationship between Mary Ann and Robert subtly began to change. He saw her daily, followed his mother's progress, talked about everything. Robert, who was processing his divorce from Patricia and dealing with the betrayal, found a comforting presence in Mary Ann. She didn't judge him, didn't ask for anything. She was just there, genuine and sincere. Mary Ann, in turn, saw in Robert a man different from anyone she had ever known. He treated her with respect, valued her opinions, asked about her family, her dreams. He didn't see her as inferior because of her humble origins, but as an equal. This both frightened and enchanted her. Amelia, observant as ever, noticed the exchanged glances, the conversations that lingered, the way Robert always found excuses to visit the house when he knew Mary Ann would be there. One afternoon, while Mary Ann was helping her with physiotherapy, the elderly woman commented with a mischievous smile, "My son is in love with you, you know." Mary Ann blushed intensely. "Mrs. Amelia, don't say that. I'm just your caregiver." "You're much more than that, dear. And you know what else? I couldn't be happier. You have a pure heart, and my son deserves someone like that after everything he's been through." "But the difference is," Mary Ann began, her voice full of insecurity, "he's a rich, successful businessman. I'm a girl from the East End who barely finished high school." "So what?" Amelia retorted firmly. "What matters is character, heart. You've shown more courage and integrity than many people born with a silver spoon. Don't diminish yourself, Mary Ann. You are worth as much as anyone." Meanwhile, Amelia also began to develop a new vision for the future. Talking with Mary Ann about the difficulties many elderly people faced, especially the poorer and abandoned ones, an idea began to germinate. What if we could help other people as I was helped? What if we created something to care for those no one cares for? Robert, upon hearing his mother's idea, immediately supported it. They had resources, they had experience, and now they had purpose. They decided to create a foundation dedicated to caring for vulnerable elderly people, a place where people like Amelia could receive dignified care, attention, and affection. Mary Ann was invited to participate in the project from the beginning. Her practical experience and natural sensitivity for caring for people would be fundamental. Together, the three began to plan what would become the Rebirth Foundation, a space that would combine medical, care, social activities, and above all, respect for the dignity of each elderly person. The Rebirth Foundation opened its doors a year after Amelia's hospitalization. The first centre was inaugurated in the East End of London, in a humble neighbourhood not far from where Mary Ann had grown up. It was a spacious and welcoming place, with gardens, common rooms, medical offices, and comfortable rooms for elderly people who needed more intensive care. The inauguration was an emotional event. Dozens of people attended, including Mary Ann's family. Grace, her mother, cried with pride as she saw her daughter introduced as one of the founders. Her siblings, especially Raphael, the youngest, looked at their sister with renewed admiration. Raphael, now 22, worked as an assistant in a building materials store. He had always been proud and independent, but had struggled to accept the change in Mary Ann's life. He thought she might be being used, that this new life was too good to be true. There had been growing tension between the siblings, fueled by Raphael's fear of losing the Mary Ann he knew. The tension exploded when Raphael was accused of theft at work. Expensive equipment disappeared from the stockroom, and Raphael, being the youngest and having the least time at the company, was immediately blamed. He called Mary Ann in despair, swearing his innocence, but he had already been fired and threatened with criminal prosecution. Mary Ann didn't hesitate. She sought out Robert and explained the situation. Together they went to the store and spoke with the owner. Robert, using his influence and resources, hired a private investigator who quickly discovered that the real culprit was the store manager, who had been diverting products for months and used Raphael as a scapegoat. With the evidence presented, Raphael was exonerated and the manager arrested. But more important than that, Raphael finally understood that Robert was not a threat, but someone who genuinely cared about Mary Ann and her family. He apologized to his sister for his suspicions and began to support her completely. As the foundation grew and established itself, Mary Ann blossomed in ways she never imagined possible. She completed her nursing course with excellent grades and became the foundation's care coordinator. Her natural talent for dealing with the elderly was recognized by everyone. She had patience, empathy, and above all, treated each person with the dignity they deserved. Robert, in turn, was falling more in love every day. He watched Mary Ann work, saw how dedicated she was, how she transformed the lives of the people around her. He also saw her strength, her intelligence, her beauty that came from within. But he was afraid of scaring her, of making her feel pressured or uncomfortable. It was Amelia who finally pushed the two towards each other. One evening, she organized a dinner at her house and invited both, as well as Lucy and her family. After the meal, when everyone was in the living room chatting animatedly, Amelia made a toast. "I want to thank all of you for being here, for being part of this family that we rebuilt together." She looked at Mary Ann with tenderness. "Especially you, dear Mary Ann. You not only saved my life, but brought light back into this family. You brought hope, love, purpose, and I know my son feels the same way I do." Robert blushed, but did not look away from Mary Ann. "It's true," he said, his voice firm despite his nervousness. "Mary Ann, you changed my life in ways I can't even explain. You made me believe. Again, in kindness, in honesty, in true love, and I—" He paused, taking a deep breath. "I fell in love with you, for your soul, for who you are." The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone looked at Mary Ann, waiting for her reaction. She felt her heart beating so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Tears began to roll down her face. "Robert," she began, her voice trembling, "I also have feelings for you, but I'm so scared. Afraid of not being good enough, of not belonging in your world, that one day you'll wake up and realize you made a mistake." Robert stood up and went to her, kneeling beside her. He took her hands and looked deep into her eyes. "Mary Ann Silver, you are the most incredible woman I have ever met. I don't care where you came from, how much money you have or don't have, what school you attended. I care about who you are deep in your heart, and that person is extraordinary. I don't want you to be anything other than what you are. It's you I love." Mary Ann felt as if her chest would explode with emotion. She touched Robert's face tenderly. "Then yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The room erupted in applause and tears of happiness. Grace hugged Amelia, both mothers crying with joy. Raphael cheered as Lucy smiled emotionally. It was a moment of pure happiness, of genuine love being celebrated. The following months were a period of growth in all areas. The foundation expanded and opened 2 more centres, one in South London and another in North London. Hundreds of elderly people were being cared for, receiving medical attention, adequate nutrition, and recreational activities. Many of them had been abandoned by their families, others lived alone in precarious conditions. There they found not only assistance, but dignity and community. However, not everything was easy. The foundation began to suffer attacks on social media. Anonymous profiles spread lies, saying that the elderly were being mistreated, that money was being diverted. The fake news spread quickly, causing concern among donors and families. Robert and Mary Ann discovered that behind the attacks was a group linked to Patricia, who, even in prison, still had external contacts trying to harm them. They had to hire a specialized crisis management company to combat the lies with transparency and facts. They opened the foundation's doors for independent inspections, invited journalists for visits, and documented every procedure. The truth prevailed, but it was a stressful period. During one of the crises, one of the elderly residents of the foundation, Mr. Anthony, an 87-year-old man whom Mary Ann personally cared for, mysteriously disappeared. The police were immediately called, and everyone panicked. Hours later, they discovered that he had simply gone for a walk and gotten lost, confused. He was found in a nearby park by a couple who recognized him from news reports about the foundation and brought him back, safely. The incident, although positively resolved, served to reinforce security protocols. Mary Ann implemented a more attentive monitoring system without taking away the freedom of the elderly residents, but ensuring they were always safe. While dealing with these professional challenges, Mary Ann and Robert's relationship deepened. They shared not only work at the foundation, but also simple moments, walks in the park, dinners at small restaurants Mary Ann loved, afternoons helping the children from the neighborhood where she grew up with recreational activities they organized on weekends. Robert discovered a lightness he hadn't felt in years. Mary Ann taught him to see beauty in simple things, to laugh more, to worry less about status and more about essence. She, in turn, learned from him about planning, about how to turn dreams into reality through organized work and persistence. One night, 6 months after that declaration of love, Robert took Mary Ann to the terrace of his mother's house. They had decorated the space with small lights, creating a magical atmosphere. The city of London gleamed in the distance, but there, in that moment, it was just the 2 of them and the stars. "Mary Ann Silver," Robert began, taking her hands. "You entered my life as my mother's caregiver, but you became the caregiver of my heart, of my soul. You showed me that true love doesn't care about titles, surnames, bank accounts. It is born where there is courage, empathy, and the conscious choice to do good." He knelt, taking a box from his pocket. Inside was a simple but beautiful ring with a delicate diamond. "Will you marry me? Will you build a family with me? Will you continue changing the world by my side?" Mary Ann couldn't stop crying. "Yes," she said between sobs. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The wedding was celebrated 6 months later in an emotional ceremony that brought both families together. Amelia, radiantly healthy, was in the front row next to Grace, both mothers crying with joy. Lucy and her children came from Edinburgh. Raphael was one of the groomsmen. The entire community from Mary Ann's neighbourhood attended, proud to see one of their girls achieve so much happiness. Mary Ann wore the wedding dress that had been Amelia's in her own wedding decades ago, restored and adjusted. It was a powerful symbol of continuity, of history renewed. Robert wore an elegant suit, but without excessive pomp. The ceremony was held in the garden of the First Rebirth Foundation Center, surrounded by the elderly residents they cared for, who were now part of their extended family. A year after the wedding, Helen was born, named in honor of Amelia's first caregiver, the one who had also tried to help despite her fear. The girl brought even more joy to the family. Amelia, now a great-grandmother, dedicated her days to her granddaughter, telling stories, teaching life lessons. The Rebirth Foundation became a national reference in elderly care. Mary Ann received several awards for her work, including a human rights recognition from the government. Her story was told in newspapers, television programs, becoming an inspiration to many. But despite all the fame and recognition, Mary Ann remained the same humble girl who once cleaned houses to help her mother. She continued visiting her old neighborhood, helping young people who dreamed of studying but lacked resources. The foundation created a scholarship program for technical courses, especially in healthcare, training new caregivers. On a sunny afternoon, 5 years after everything had begun, Mary Ann was in the foundation's garden, playing with Helen and watching the elderly. Residents participate in a dance class. Robert appeared behind her, embracing her from behind. "Thinking about what?" he asked, kissing her hair. "About how unpredictable life is," she replied, leaning back against him. "A few years ago, I was just a cleaner trying to survive. Today, I'm a wife, a mother, a founder of an institution that helps hundreds of people. It feels like a dream. It's real. And you deserve every bit of this happiness," Robert said tenderly. "You built it with your own hands, with your enormous heart." Mary Ann turned to him, smiling. "We built it. Together. You, me, your mother, my family. All together." Amelia, who watched the scene from a distance, seated in a comfortable chair, smiled to herself. That courageous girl had saved more than her life that day. She had saved an entire family, brought light where there had been darkness, love where there had been betrayal, and most importantly, she had proven that true love, the kind that transforms and heals, knows no barriers of class, money, or origin. It simply exists, pure and powerful, when it finds hearts willing to embrace it. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Mary Ann, Robert and Mrs. Amelia has deeply touched your hearts. Stories like this remind us that the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult, can transform not just one life, but entire families. If this narrative moved you, we have a special playlist full of other stories that celebrate love, overcoming adversity, and the strength of the human spirit. You can find it by clicking here. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like to help us continue bringing stories that inspire and move. Every day we share unique narratives that explore the beauty and complexity of life. And do you have a story of overcoming or true love to share? Leave it in the comments, we'd love to read it. We look forward to seeing you in the next story. See you soon.